Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. Always a pleasure to be with you live in the middle of the day. What else would I rather do? And we have a busy show today. Man, we had to pick and choose what to get in this hour. Coming up in a few minutes, our friend Jonathan Cho, senior fellow at the Discovery Institute, is going to join us because he's just about to drop. We're getting a little preview of it. But this really heartbreaking story, he spent the weekend in downtown Seattle. I mean, getting images of despair down there that you will just not see anywhere else. And I'll warn you in advance, we'll play it later. It's hard to watch, but it's so important because today at 1 p.m., Seattle's mayor is coming out and he's going to outline a new effort to try to deal with the drug crisis and what's happening in downtown Seattle. So we're going to play that story of his. He's going to join us, and he's also going to preview what the mayor's expected to talk about. Also coming up today on our segment Unbelievable, I'm going to do something that is frankly unbelievable for me, and I'm going to endorse a property tax increase, okay? And I have to just absolutely grit my teeth to do that. You have to know that if I didn't think it was the right thing to do, I would never support a tax increase of any kind for any reason. So I hope that you're open to listening to my explanation for that. Also, coming up later when we dip outside of Washington State, I don't know if you saw the headlines of what happened in Chicago over the weekend, but kids gone wild. I mean, youth gone wild, violence. And then, I think it correlates to some of what we're seeing in the city of Seattle as well. And Chicago, man, they had a chance to move on from Lori Lightfoot. And instead of moving on, they just doubled down. And you've got a mayor-elect there who wants to coddle kids. And I just don't think that coddling criminal minors is the way to get Chicago out of the mess that it's in, is the way to get any other major American city out of this violent trend that we're seeing. So we're going to get to all of that. Nicole, hello.
Hi, Brandi.
Greetings. How are you?
I'm doing well. How was your weekend? How was the Mariners game?
Yeah, I went to the Mariners game for my friend Carl's birthday, and it was really fun. We had great seats. They got us great seats close to the Mariners dugout. I hadn't been in a while. It was a little chilly, but...
April baseball game, still a little chilly. I was supposed to play softball yesterday, but that was a rain out.
Oh, it was a rain out.
Because it downpoured.
And you were probably like, yes.
It was okay. I'd rather play when it gets nicer.
Yeah, it's nice out today. Super nice out today. So yeah, my weekend was great, kind of relaxing, caught up on a bunch of busy work. I hope your guys' weekend was good. Remember, feel free to post comments, questions in the chat on Facebook, YouTube, Patreon, Locals. We'll get to those as always at the end of the show. I got to start with a little mea culpa today. I hate doing corrections. But you just got to do them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just got to. This is only the second time I've ever had like a true fall on the sword correction.
It's a clarification.
No, it's a correction.
Yes. Okay.
But I've only had one other instance in my career that I know of where I was truly like, wow, I just plain got that wrong. And this would be number 2. But I've always said, it sucks to issue corrections. No journalist likes to do it. But if you can't correct what's wrong, why would people ever trust you?
Right.
So but I also want to explain my work product here as to how I got this so wrong, because it's not like I just spew things without thinking them through. And in this case, so I'll just explain it to you. So last week on the show, I was talking about the drug crisis and a drug bust that happened in December. And I said King County Executive Dow Constantine just doesn't seem to care. So here's what I said on the show last week. There was a bus that had enough doses of fentanyl to kill every person in King County. Did you hear Dow Constantine say anything about it? No. Well, apparently he did say something about it. And he didn't just say something about it, like it was pretty public. So his communications person called me out on Twitter at like 10 p.m. Friday night, which, I mean, he can do that. He's well within his right. I'm very critical of their office. So he put up a tweet about it and essentially said, hold on, now I don't have the tweet right in front of me because I can't read it off that screen. Give me 1 second. He said, he quotes me, he says, there was a bus that had enough doses of fentanyl to kill every person in King County. Did you hear Dow Constantine say anything about it? No. And he goes to me, he only hosted the press conference alongside the undersheriff. Comment all you want, Brandi Kruse, but you're making stuff up. And there he posts not only a link to my words, but a picture of the King County executive next to the undersheriff talking about the drug bust in question. So I want to explain my and I said, oh, wow, that's egregious. I'll correct this. but I kind of figured out, I don't feel as, what do you want to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, making stuff up, I know you're going to, admit that you missed something there, but that's not making stuff up. That's missing something.
Yeah, I missed the press conference happened, but basically I went through my work product on this because I always want to make sure I'm factually accurate. Even though I'm giving my opinion, anytime I get something wrong, I need to correct it. And I did get this wrong by virtue of missing something. So I felt worse about it on Friday than when I went back through and figured out, why did I say that if there was so much ample evidence that he actually did talk about it? So what happened is the big drug bust I was referring to was part of an overall operation, but the drug bust I was referring to itself happened December 22nd. So when it happened on December 22nd, and I taped my show December 23rd, and I was talking about it, King County Executive Dow Constantine hadn't said anything about it yet. So when I talked about it on December 23rd, the point I was making is I want Dow Constantine, Jay Inslee out in front when these things happen, talking and urging the White House to take action at the southern border. Because I really feel like if they care about people dying on the streets, they should care about the border crisis because that's where these drugs are coming from. So anyway, and at that time when I said that, he had not said anything about it yet. And then later on that day, he ended up putting out a tweet like congratulating them on their drug bust. But if you go back to that picture that Chase Gallagher tweeted of, do you have that picture, Nicole? Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was literally standing by the undersheriff. So what I didn't realize is that's actually from February. So what happened is he had a press conference with the undersheriff, but it was 2 months after the drug bust that I was referring to because they had a press conference on the larger operation. Mm-hmm. So then I didn't feel so bad. I was like, okay, he had it. I just didn't know that he had a press conference about that drug bust 2 months later. Still, I should have just double checked and made sure, has he said anything about it in the meantime? So that's totally my bad, but I wanted to correct that and just explain sort of my work product and how I got to that point. It was a press conference that happened 2 months after the drug bust I was referring to. And I will also say, just since we're on the subject, I do still want to see the governor, the King County executive, come out and say something about where these drugs are coming from in the sense that they want more security at the southern border to stop these drugs from coming into our communities and killing people. I'd like to see from Democrats across the country dealing with these drug issues of drugs coming up from Mexico. I'd like to see a united front where they say, look, yes, there's a humanitarian crisis at the southern border, but also these drugs are coming up and they're killing people on our streets. And we have to deal with that because stopping the flow is really, at the end of the day, a huge part in preventing the deaths. And I know it's not politically palatable for some of their base, but I want to hear them talk about that in a more forceful way. Okay, moving on, but still staying on the subject of substance abuse. I'm going to change my opinion slightly on something. So I've been talking about how there's been some anger directed at Republicans in Olympia who have supported watered down versions of public safety bills. So, for instance, the bill that would give police some power back to pursue suspects, is going through the legislature in a very watered down form that I really don't think is going to have a substantial impact on public safety. That being said, my argument has been something is better than nothing on the pursuit bill, and I stand behind that. Even if their changes will allow police to pursue one more person, that's better than no changes at all. Now, I also shared a similar sentiment when it comes to the Blake fix. So a little background for people who don't follow the podcast on a regular basis. The Blake decision was a decision by the Washington State Supreme Court that nullified our state's felony drug possession statute. And the result was essentially de facto drug legalization for possession, that you could just walk around carrying whatever you want, and there wasn't a felony law on the books to prohibit that. So last legislative session, they put a little Band-Aid over it, and really the goal this legislative session is to find a permanent solution for the Blake fix. But like the pursuit law, the Blake fix from its original, bipartisan proposals at the beginning of the session has been watered down and watered down and watered down. And we've been talking about, the carrot and the stick. Making sure that people can get treatment, but also making sure there's some consequences to protect society as a whole. And the amount of stick in the current version of the bill is very, very, very low. But last week, I kind of still took that position of, well, something is better than nothing. Having a law on the books to criminalize drug possession is better than not doing anything this session, and in July, going back to de facto legalization. I'm changing my mind on that a little bit because we discussed last week how if this watered down Blake Blake fix passes, it will have a local preemption, meaning that the laws that some localities have passed to try to enforce, drug possession on their own would be null and void. So to me, if the Blake fix that ends up, being up for a vote, this is the final thing, is so weak that it won't substantially improve the drug crisis, to me, it might actually be better to kill it, for Republicans to kill it, because they do need some Republican support, I think, to push anything through, because the Democrats are a little split on this issue. And then that will allow localities, cities and counties, to put their own laws on the books that are more strict. Does that make sense? So if the option is have a state law again, but it's very, very, very weak, or have no state law governing drug possession, and allow cities and counties that want to actually do something meaningful to do something on their own, that to me, having mulled that issue this weekend, that to me makes a lot more sense. Now, I'm hopeful that at some point from now until the end of the session, which is racing toward us, that there will be meaningful change to that Blake fix so the state law has more teeth. But if it doesn't, I actually think that it ought to be killed, so that cities who really understand that there's a reason why we criminalize drug possession can take matters into their own hands. So I wanted to kind of talk through my thought process on these things as the session moves forward and as the session develops. All right, coming up in a minute, I'm going to get to, on the drug crisis, my endorsement of a tax. Wow, I might lose fans today.
You've already got people riled up in the comments.
Oh my God, you guys at least have enough respect for me that you'll listen to my argument on this, okay? And know that I do live in a home and I am not voting to tax someone else. This would be voting to tax myself. So just give me the time to get there. Before we get there, though, I wanted to make a pitch for our Sunday show because it's turning out amazing.
It's fun.
I love our Sunday show. So
Yes.
we do Sundays with subscribers on Sunday mornings, and it's much more of a relaxed vibe, and we do in-depth interviews that are really meant to challenge our thinking, your thinking on critical issues. And this past Sunday, a friend of mine, Emily Cantrell, who's a survivor of the Las Vegas shooting, has actually been behind some of the most controversial gun control measures to pass in our state. And yes, we are still friends, even though we disagree on this issue. But she came in and we had a good conversation about some of my disagreements with some of what she's helping to push for. Here's a clip. If you had a politician that came to you and said, "Hey, Emily, we're working in news still. Sorry, but you got to kill this story. I'm a state senator. I'm the governor. You can't run this story." What would your response be?
Do we still have newspapers now?
What would your response be, though? You would say we have the first, that's unconstitutional.
Right, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is the same argument people are using against you, is it's unconstitutional. So I think there's this desire to have a pure reading of other amendments to the Constitution while taking liberties with the Second Amendment. That's what I have an issue with. Yeah, and we discussed this for a long time, both from a constitutional perspective and a public safety perspective. Some of the other things Democrats are doing that seem very counter to, their push for gun control, like reducing punishments for people who actually commit crimes with guns. And so, the kind of takeaway from that conversation, if you want to go watch it, because it is exclusive for subscribers, was, look, if the will of the people is to change the Constitution, then fine, by all means, go about that process. That process exists for a reason, but we can't take liberties with certain amendments and not others. And then I just want to also, again, to try to get you to watch the Sunday show with us, because I'm just loving it. The week before, because we just did our second Sundays with subscribers. The week before, we had on a Black business owner in Seattle named Margie Haywood, and she's very passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. I made it clear that I think that those can border on racism against white people, and she joined us for an awesome conversation about that. How can we account for the realities of this country's past without doing it in a way that feels like a punishment for white people?
Yeah, there you go. And there you go. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, is because I hope that when I talk to people, that they will hear love over anything else that I ever talk about. Because I feel like that is really going to be the thing. to when you said that. Is how it's going to be our love for one another. And once we start looking, not acknowledging that you're white, acknowledging that I'm black. I'm not saying whether people say colorblind. Don't be colorblind. See that I'm black. But when we're able to love each other beyond our skin color and for the qualities that we all contribute to this world, we can do some great work.
Yeah, so that's a little taste of our Sundays with subscribers. We're on our, this will be our third week, and I'm loving the conversations that we're having. And I really also value for subscribers who watch them on Patreon and Locals, I value the way that you're engaging with those interviews and the comments that you leave and how thoughtful they are, recognizing that a lot of you probably don't agree with the opinions of those two guests, but I've been so proud of you guys and how great you are. So if you want to join us for Sundays with subscribers and get some other great content that is exclusive for Undivided subscribers, find out how you can sign up for $5 a month at undividedpod.com. That's undividedpod.com. And then Nicole and I also do tea time on Sundays. And we just chat about the week gone by, and it's so much fun. All right, I ran into a neighbor. I was at a coffee shop where we live, and she was talking about how they put their house on the market, and I thought, oh, how'd that go? They actually sold it in a day for asking price, which got me thinking because we've just added Sell with Wes, Wes Jones and Associates as a sponsor on the podcast. Awesome real estate agency, real estate agent. And he was telling me when we were talking about the sponsorship, and I was asking, well, how's the market going? You know, he said that he actually sees a little window of opportunity right now if you're looking to sell your home, where he thinks you could have competing offers. You could even have some cash offers coming in. And so if you have been thinking about selling your home, maybe you're moving further away from Seattle, or maybe you're moving out of the state entirely, check out sellwithwes.com. That's sellwithwes.com. Him and his team have, you know, really interesting, innovative marketing strategy where they list it locally, they list it internationally, just to get more eyeballs on that listing. And again, he sees a little window of opportunity right now, but if you're not sure, like, is this a good time to sell my home or not? Wes is awesome, and he'll be totally honest with you about the market and answer any questions that you might have. So sellwithwes.com. Okay, am I ready for the hate I'm about to receive, Nicole? Before we dive into it? All right.
No, I think that'll be cool.
I am going to do something I've never done, and I'm going to endorse a tax increase. Let's get to our segment, Unbelievable. Now, you have to understand that I am very anti-tax. And in that sense, I know taxes are necessary to be able to run a functioning society in a first world country. But I also believe that the government is way too bloated and that we could do just as much as we're doing now with far less money. I believe there's a lot of government waste, and perhaps no arena is that more true than on the issue of homelessness and substance abuse and mental health issues. We have flushed down the toilet billions of dollars in this state for nothing. For nothing. To have a homeless crisis on our streets today that is worse than it was 10 years ago. So we've been talking a lot on the podcast about how this, all of a sudden this year, everybody wants more money for homelessness. You know, Governor Jay Inslee wants $4 billion, he's saying, is for housing, and he thinks that'll solve the homeless crisis, which drives me bananas. You have the King County Regional Homelessness Authority that wants like a 10-fold increase in its operating budget. For what? For what? You have Seattle's mayor that is supporting, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's millions of additional dollars. Again, a lot of it for housing. And then you have King County Executive Dow Constantine, who has pushed for, and if you live in King County, you now have to make sure my address is not on here because I have haters everywhere. If you live in King County, you got a ballot for the April special election. There's two things on it, and one is for King County Proposition 1. And it is it's titled Crisis Care Centers Levy. And I'll read directly from the ballot language for you here. If approved, this proposition would fund behavioral health services and capital facilities, including a county-wide crisis care centers network, increased residential treatment, mobile crisis care, post-discharge stabilization, and workforce supports. It would authorize an additional 9-year property tax levy for collection beginning in 2024 at 0.145 cents per 1,000 of assessed valuation, with the 2024 levy amount being the base for calculating annual increases in 2025 through 2032, blah, blah, blah. Exempt eligible seniors, veterans, and disabled persons. Should this proposition be approved or rejected? Okay. I'm going to, just so you know that I am actually doing what I'm suggesting, and again, that's all this is a suggestion. This Proposition 1 impacts me and my family. We live in King County. That's why I have a ballot. Our property taxes will go up as a result of this. I'm going to, on the air today, before I explain, I'm going to fill that ballot in. Are you seeing this now, Constantine? Can we be friends now? I'm going to say approved. I realize this is going to anger you, and let me explain what's going on here.
Wow, you're really getting that box.
I want it to be perfect.
Okay.
I want there to be no confusion. So here's the deal. Do I have concerns about them asking for more money, King County? 100%. Am I going to pledge to you to bird dog every single, bird dog, watchdog, every single cent of this money as this comes to fruition if it passes? 100%. You have my commitment to that every step of the way. But I have spent so much of the past year railing on politicians who believe that housing is the solution to the crisis that we're in. Housing is not the solution to homelessness. Housing is not going to fix the drug crisis on our streets. It is not going to fix the mental health crisis on our streets. So I cannot, in the same breath, rail against the stupidity of believing that spending money on housing is going to fix the crisis, while then looking at a proposal that isn't for housing, that is for the things, some of the things we need to fix the crisis, and vote no on it. It is going to take money to get us out of this mess. I hate that I have to give that money to some of the same politicians who put us here in the first place. But if we do nothing, then nothing's going to happen. They have dug us into a hole so deep, at this point we have no choice but to spend money to get out of it. And I'm not happy about it. I do this very begrudgingly. But when you're talking about some of the things in here, it shows to me a recognition of acknowledging the true crisis. And when we talk about crisis care networks for the mentally ill across the county, a mobile crisis care investment, stabilizing people after they're released from the hospital for a mental health issue, and then workforce supports. We need to get people, even if they're suffering from an issue, we need to make sure that they can stabilize and contribute to society in some sort of meaningful way. Now, that does not mean that I'm 100% sold that they're going to use all this money well. Like I said, I promise you that I am going to be there on the back end and hope that they're accountable for this money. But I can't in good conscience preach that politicians should be spending money on this kind of stuff, not housing, and then not vote for this kind of stuff when they say this is what we're going to spend money on. So that's where I'm coming from on this. And I also heard from a politician whose opinion I value very much, and that's Kent Mayor Dana Ralph, who she and I are in pretty lockstep on things. And she went to Arizona and toured a facility that this is kind of modeled after. And she said, Brandi, they're doing great stuff down there. And so I just have to hope that they've learned a lesson at some point to invest in the right things. But if we say no every single time, I don't know how we're going to dig ourselves out of this. So I am sure that there are some of you who are like, Brandi, I'm not going to do that. That's fine. This is my endorsement. You guys do what's right for you. You do what's right for your family. But I know that for our family, we're not planning on going anywhere. And, I live out of Seattle now, having been confronted by a guy on drugs with a knife walking my dogs down a riverbank that used to be safe, something's got to be done. And so I'm going to hope that this isn't just another wasted vote and wasted money. And I hope something comes out of it, but I just want other entities like the state and Governor Jay Inslee to see that housing investments aren't going to fix this. These are the kind of investments that I'm hopeful will fix this. So that's where I'm coming from on that. Nicole's manning the text line, so I'm hoping that that doesn't elicit too much anger, but who knows? So that's where I'm at on that. All right, we're going to be joined by Jonathan Cho coming up in a moment, but first let me tell you about a great, awesome deal for small business owners that one of our sponsors is putting out there on the table. If you run a small business, 5 employees, 50 employees, and you know that you need some help with tech stuff, maybe you need to navigate to the cloud, you need to protect, have something in place to protect your data, your customers' data. Maybe you just need something as simple as new computers for your employees. One of our newest sponsors, MethodWorks Consulting, is offering 1 month of free security monitoring and a free security review for undivided viewers and listeners. And Mark Harmsworth actually owns MethodWorks, which to me is great because Mark Harmsworth, he worked at Microsoft for years, went out and started his own thing, but he also served in the Washington State Legislature, a very pro-business Republican. So he gets it. He gets what small businesses are going through. And he also, communicated to me that there's a lot of small businesses, and I know this from experience, you're focused on trying to grow your business, trying to run your business, and then you're faced with all these things. You're like, oh my God, taxes, payroll, all this is completely like I'm out of my depth. And technology is a big one where businesses wait too long to get someone to help them with their technology needs. And he said, you get one security breach for a small business, that can be it for you. So again, methodworks.com, visit methodworks.com. Make sure to tell them that you heard about them on the Undivided podcast from the Brandi Kruse. You get that free security review and 1 month of free security monitoring. All right, the following segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you get on their mailing list because they'll present you with all sorts of cool opportunities to actually, like I said, put frustration into action and get out and make a difference on some of these key issues. Our friend Jonathan Cho over at Discovery Institute has given us a little sneak peek at a story he's dropping. He might have just dropped it or he's about to drop it today. He's been doing some awesome reporting on the homelessness crisis, the drug crisis, the crime crisis, and all of that. And he spent some time in downtown Seattle over the weekend because coming up at 1 p.m. today, Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell is outlining his plan to revitalize downtown and address public safety and health issues. So ahead of that, Jonathan Cho thought, hey, well, why don't I go downtown and see kind of the state of things this weekend ahead of the mayor's announcement, and then, see what the mayor wants to do. So I will warn you, we're going to play this whole story from Jonathan. I'm going to warn you, it's hard to watch. There are some images of people really in the depths of addiction and despair. And so, view it accordingly. But I just thought there's such an important, it's such an important thing for everyone to see to understand the true extent of things. So here's a story from Jonathan Cho.
Even in the pouring rain, the addiction is fierce.
What is that?
It's called pixie dust.
Drug users congregate under umbrellas near bus stops and vestibules, or simply get high out in the open in front of shocked parents and children.
But if anything, it's teaching her not to do drugs. I never will.
Good for you.
Look at this man overdosing near the Ross store.
Was he doing blues?
I don't know what is it.
Police rushed in to save his life with several hits of Narcan as people watched in horror.
Are you just used to this?
I've been here for a long ass time, so yeah.
This all happened over the weekend in downtown Seattle.
All of that in front of people, it's bad.
With most of the action concentrated on 3rd Ave and Pike Street.
Whatever the city decides to do is not going to stop.
My ejected. You are my ejected.
Right in the middle of this tourist gateway.
They check the purity of it, they tell you what's in there.
The drug of choice remains fentanyl, also known on the street as Fetty or blues. These tiny pills being smoked on sheets of foil now go for as little as $2 a pop.
All of us have Narcan.
Health officials say it's the primary driver behind King County's record drug overdose deaths last year.
So you're trying to make sure that your fentanyl doesn't have the Tranq in it, is that right?
Yeah.
Making matters worse, Tranq is in the region.
Aren't you concerned about getting the Tranq, Fetty, in your batch?
I've already had it.
The DEA recently issued a public safety warning saying illicit drugs laced with the animal tranquilizer xylazine causes flesh-rotting sores on users, often leading to amputations.
The Fetty could be laced with Tranq. That's the problem.
That's xylazine. It's Tranq.
You know it's in there, but you're still doing it?
I'm addicted to it.
While the situation is dire, some say this is actually progress, and Seattle is headed in the right direction. because it used to be far worse.
The mayor is cleaning up the city.
Just hang out. Let's go find somewhere else to hang out.
More officers are now patrolling the area and intentionally pushing the illicit activity off the sidewalks.
No drugs out here, buddy.
Drug dealers and people selling stolen merchandise are being arrested.
They're cracking down hard.
And some of the businesses that closed down last year because of the crime and open-air drug use have decided to come back.
Still a lot more to go, though.
So on my walk along 3rd Avenue last week, I actually saw people using fentanyl.
On Monday afternoon, Mayor Bruce Harrell is expected to tout some of these accomplishments under his watch and finally unveil more details about the much-anticipated downtown activation plan and issue an executive order to address the fentanyl crisis. But even with these hopeful signs and possibly a change in culture, the addicts say they're simply moving to other nearby streets and into alleyways. And it's unclear how many of these men and women are actually getting into treatment.
What do you think about this open-air drug use? Seattle. It's Seattle?
Walk over a few blocks near City Hall. The tents have returned to Cherry Street and many office buildings remain vacant. If the focus is truly on reclaiming and revitalizing greater downtown, 12th and Jackson in the Chinatown International District also faces the same challenges.
Mad people overdosing, man.
Many in the city are tired of temporary fixes and now hoping and waiting for lasting solutions.
Again, that's Jonathan Cho, senior fellow at Discovery Institute, doing reporting for fixhomelessness.org. Awesome stuff, hard to watch. And it's also hard to believe that that's actually an improvement. That's actually what an improvement in downtown Seattle looks like from, say, 6 months or a year ago. I did ask Jonathan, since we were going to air his story today, to come in. He's going to be at a press conference that the mayor is having at 1 p.m., but he was nice enough to stop by the show to talk about this story and some of the stuff that he saw downtown. Jonathan Cho, welcome to Undivided. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Brandi, thanks again for having me.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the video we just played momentarily and about the press conference that the mayor of Seattle is going to have coming up at 1 p.m. But first, some congratulations are in order. You know, it's really odd because the government keeps saying you're not a journalist. And then I see over the weekend that you got nominated for 4 Emmy Awards for excellence in journalism. So I guess I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's not up to the government to determine who's a journalist and who's not. The Emmys, just one of the highest honors in broadcast television and journalism. And it's, you know, I got nominated by my peers across the nation. So at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yeah, and I think what's really telling about that, and what's interesting is one of the nominations are actually for a story you did while at Como, and the other 3 are for your work with the with Discovery Institute. But what's interesting is, as you point out, for people kind of behind the curtains stuff, so the way that the Emmy Awards work for news is there are regional nominations, which these are, and those are judged by journalists from some other region. And so these are people who probably don't know who you are, who are judging you simply on the merits of your reporting. And so I think it's so interesting that these journalists who, you know, don't know about the false controversy around you are like, yeah, that's good stuff. That has to feel good.
It really does. And look, Brandi, I'm not the type to just constantly toot my own horn, but, you know, I wanted to flex just a little bit because of the circumstances you just laid out. It's been a hell of a year for me. For your listeners, your viewers who may not know, I was fired from Como News, a local ABC affiliate this past year, accused of promoting the Proud Boys over a live tweet. Obviously, that was not the case. And I end up jumping over to the Discovery Institute, a Seattle-based think tank that offered me a media fellowship. So the reason why I kind of put it out there, again, it's just nominations. I haven't won yet. At the end of the day, it's about, you know, winning the hardware. But for us, it's a win, because we defied the odds. This is the first time, and it's historic, that a local think tank is now competing with newsrooms in Seattle for these Emmy Awards and some of these hard news and continuing coverage categories. And I also got nominated for overall excellence as a reporter. So that's, again, really sweet for me.
Yeah, and I mentioned this too on Twitter. I know that the legacy newsrooms are going to push back. I'm sure they're already on the phone to Natus saying he can't be nominated for these awards. So I look forward to I got some spies in interesting places, and I'll have to see if any of that pushback happens, which
let me know.
I really believe that it will. So let's get to you're going to City Hall for a press conference that Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell is having at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
And he is going to discuss a plan to try to deal with the drug crisis downtown. So lay out what you're expecting to hear from the mayor today.
Yeah, this is a long-awaited kind of preview of his downtown activation plan. And also the mayor is going to issue an executive order to deal with the fentanyl and drug crisis that is just ravaging this city. Look, this past weekend, as the piece you just watched, this Saturday and Sunday, I intentionally wanted to go out there and say, look, here's what's happening right now, real time. Unfortunately, the drug use is still happening. The black markets where, addicts are, selling stolen goods still happening. The tourists, the children, the parents walking through these drug dens, unfortunately, it's still there. However, depending who you ask and the time of day, it's actually gotten better. You have more of a police presence there. You have officers actually walking this beat now, pushing these addicts off the streets. It looks cleaner. However, the addicts are going into the side streets, the alleyways. And another really devastating combination on the streets right now is fentanyl and xylazine, now called the Tranq fentanyl. So I've been seeing some of that in downtown Seattle. So anyway, long story short, the mayor has his hands full.
Really quickly on the Tranq stuff, and we just watched your piece. There's no reversal drug for it, right? There's nothing comparable to Narcan for it.
Yeah, Narcan doesn't work. And one of the other consequences for this is that if you ingest this stuff, again, the xylazine is an animal tranquilizer. So one of the consequences is that your skin starts to rot off and your, open sores just form on your body and ultimately leads to amputation in some cases. So, I'm seeing a lot of this now on the streets, and I talked to several addicts who say they're scared of this stuff, but the addiction is so bad, they're still willing to take their chances.
Oh, well, and Nicole and I were talking on the show the other day, King County released overdose numbers by month for 2023 so far, and it's like 600 a month. And a lot of them are being saved by Narcan. But if you've got a drug that has no emergency miracle treatment like that, and we get into the point where we have 600 overdose deaths per month, I mean, I hope we don't get to that point, but I wonder what that would do for sort of the sense of urgency. So when it comes to the mayor's announcement, I mean, how much do you think he's going to be willing to, you got the carrot and the stick, to push the stick approach in trying to really use law enforcement to improve the state of downtown?
I think he's going to say that's part of the strategy. It's having a police presence and enforcing the law actually, and then prosecuting. That's a non-negotiable now. The mayor is going to have that in his strategy. The business community is demanding it. I think we're also going to see another approach to actually getting some of these addicts help. I know right now there's this, harm reduction strategy, and depending on which camp you're in, harm reduction basically tries to keep the addict alive as long as possible. But on the flip side of that, the criticism is that all these needles and meth pipes and all these supplies are being given out, no questions asked, without any requirement for treatment. So I know recently Councilmember Sarah Nelson has come out publicly to say, look, there has to be more than just harm reduction. There has to be some type of intervention where we get these addicts help and into treatment centers. So it's going to be really interesting to see, again, what the mayor lays out. But this is going to be the plan moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm happy that he is prioritizing it. I'm happy he's at least acknowledging that, hey, we have to do something, because I think there's a lot of politicians in Seattle who still have their heads in the sand on just how bad things have become. So just the fact he's willing to at least discuss it in an honest way, I do appreciate. Let me just ask you before we let you go, Jonathan, and I know we'll have you on many times between now and the city council elections in November, at least I hope so. We were just talking about, and we're going to talk on the podcast more about Chicago and what's happening there. And they got rid of Lori Lightfoot, and then they doubled down with this guy who supports many of the same policies and even wants to take them further on sort of the soft on crime approach. So I guess based on everything you cover and what you see, how ready do you think Seattleites are this year to make an overhaul at City Hall? Or are you worried that we're going to have a Chicago situation and they'll just double down on the same old stuff?
Yeah, look, I think that's the biggest concern right now. A lot of the reasonable people in Seattle do not want the activist class of council members to emerge, at least the far left activist class that is, for defunding the police, that is, for allowing the encampments to stay in place. So I believe deep down that we are going to see a change. I think Mayor Harrell, again, seen as a moderate, he's got a big challenge ahead of him, but I think he's really going to look for council members, and he's going to push for council members who align with his vision and strategy. Because quite frankly, as you know how the council works, at the end of the day, the mayor may want to do something, but if the council doesn't back him, it'll totally undercut his plan and strategy.
Yeah, I think that's what happened with Jenny Durkan, too. She was pretty moderate by Seattle standards, but the council and her were just butting heads consistently. So, Jonathan Cho, where can people follow you and watch your stuff?
Yeah, look, I'm still a senior fellow at Discovery Institute. Proud of that. Fixhomelessness.org, and of course on my social media platforms like Twitter at Choe, CHOESHOW.
All right, buddy, keep up the good work. Be safe, and congratulations again on your nominations for 4 Emmys for Excellence in Journalism.
And Brandi, thank you for always sticking by me and amplifying my work. Take care.
Always. So we appreciate Jonathan Cho. And I have this awesome story. Sad to see the state of things still. We know it can't be fixed overnight, but I'm looking forward to, again, 1 p.m. today, Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell. He's going to have a press conference, talk about an executive order addressing fentanyl and synthetic drugs, and then also talk about this downtown activation plan. Now, I'm skeptical because there have been downtown activation plans in the past. You know, the Pike Pine Renaissance, it was built as a renaissance and revitalization. And I was here long enough to remember 9.5 blocks where they went in and swept out all these drug dealers in particular. And it was good for like 6 months, and then it got bad again. So the key is not only committing to it now, but it's figuring out what is the long-term solution moving forward. And some of that has to be a continuous presence of law enforcement, which is another issue in and of itself, because we simply do not have the number of police officers that we need right now to be able to keep that issue in check. So be curious to hear what the mayor says, and I know that Jonathan Cho will be following it every step of the way. This segment was brought to you by our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Sign up for their newsletter. Find out not only what's going on, we call it Team Sanity, but also about opportunities to reach out to elected leaders to make a difference on some of these types of policies. Okay, let's step outside of Washington State for a moment, although like many things happening at crisis levels across the country, it has some relevance to what's going on here. Chicago, man. Chicago disappoints me, and it scares me that this is what's in store for Seattle this year, where there are 7 council seats that'll be on the ballot in November. And like the common sense person in me is like, of course Seattle voters will choose people who care about crime. But then I look at Chicago and they had Lori Lightfoot. She doesn't win her reelection, but they put a guy in there named Brandon Johnson, who's Lori Lightfoot on steroids when it comes to some of these pro-criminal policies. So anyway, watch this video. It's part of a story from ABC7 Chicago, where these youth in Chicago went on just this wild weekend that was not only violent, but incredibly destructive.
2 teenagers are hurt after a shooting last night in the Chicago Loop. Police say the 16 and 17-year-old boys were standing in a large crowd near Washington and State when they were shot. A large police presence could be seen as officers work to clear large crowds from downtown. And new video into our newsroom shows more of last night's chaos. People were seen kicking passing cars, crowding the streets, dancing on top of parked vehicles. And we're still waiting to find out and hear if police made any arrests from this last night. Earlier in the day yesterday, a viewer shared cell phone video showing a group of people jumping on a car that is driving along Michigan Avenue.
Yeah, and it's not just harmless. It's not just harmless fun for youth. Like you said, there's shootings. People are getting hurt. Nicole, you were telling me that some tourists had to be escorted back to their hotels by police and like told like stay inside.
Yes, and I saw one couple get attacked while in their car. They smashed the windshield, attacked the husband. The husband had to go to the hospital. The wife was talking to news. I mean, it was violent.
Yeah, this is much more than just kids out there having a field day. So anyway, this mayor-elect in Chicago, for the love of God, Chicago, he says in a statement, "In no way do I condone the destructive activity we saw in the Loop and Lakefront this weekend. It is unacceptable and has no place in our city." Should have stopped there. He didn't. He went on to say, however, it is not constructive to demonize youth who have otherwise been starved of opportunities in their own communities. Our city must work together to create spaces for youth to gather safely and responsibly under adult guidance and supervision. I'll get to more of that in a second, to ensure that every part of our city remains welcoming for both residents and visitors. First of all, this is the middle of the night. No, you don't need to create spaces for youth to gather safely and responsibly.
Like
they
the
should
Boys and
be
Girls
at
Club.
home.
We're just going to send all these violent teens to a Boys and Girls
What do you think
Club
they're going
to
to
hang
do there?
out, watch movies,
They
play
should be
games.
at home, or if they can't stay at home at night. And what was it? Was it Baltimore where the mayor put in a curfew, and then you can just go round them up. But look, again, we're not talking about some kids who would be okay at a Boys and Girls Club and they're going to play checkers. That's just not what's happening here.
And it's the community's fault, not the parents.
Right.
So it's everybody else's fault.
And you're not going to demonize them? Look what they did to people. It's insane. And I'll just play for you. Jason, our friend Jason Rantz had sent this video out, and this was, my understanding is before Brandon Johnson was elected mayor, but Chicago has had previous instances of looting. And he was on the news essentially defending what these young people were doing at the time in the looting.
So you're not condoning looting.
I'm saying that people are acting out of desperation. We don't want a society that is acting out of desperation, but you have to pay attention to the cries that people have.
So you're not condoning looting.
There's no way to embrace that. What I'm saying is you can't condone the looting that corporations continue to do every single day when they take tax dollars from black, brown, white folks all over the city of Chicago so that they can turn a profit.
And that's the guy that you guys chose to be your mayor? You can't condone the looting that corporations are doing. That's like some Shama Sawant stuff. It has no relevance to the issue. A guy that couldn't condone looting and instead blamed major corporations, some of which are the very ones that are getting looted, and we expect him to have a different reaction, then let's find the kids a safe place to go at night. It's insane. And I mean, at this point, I'm like, Chicago gets what it votes for. And you just have to, I feel bad for the people in Chicago who didn't vote for that and who are outnumbered. But it's pretty egregious. And coming up at the end of the show on my sanity check, I can't help but find some parodies to what's happening in the city of Seattle and this belief that the way to get these youth, again, violent youth, on a better path is to coddle them, is to show them that even the mayor-elect wants to make excuses for them, like everyone else in their life is either not caring about them or making excuses for them. And I'm seeing that echoed in Seattle as well. And there was something that happened in Seattle over the weekend that is just, there's such a blatant disregard for the rule of law and a flagrant disrespect for law enforcement that is not going to put these youth on a good track in life. All right, before we move on to get your comments, which I'm hoping are going to be rigorous today, I posted, I should have used my newest picture for Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. I posted a good one on Facebook.
I just gave it a little flash there.
Flash.
Sorry.
Yeah, that one's okay. I have a better one, though, that I think is a better reflection of how much weight I've lost on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan. More than 30 pounds. The bulk of it I lost in 2 months. Feeling great. Nicole and I were just chatting today about how we have to get in a rhythm, though, of like, I'll go for an hour-long walk this day, trying to just maintain, weight loss and all that stuff. But a ton of you have already started the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan. In fact, when we were at Tenino, when we were down partying in Tenino, a woman who I've seen at a couple previous events said, hey, thanks for the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan, and she's lost 20 pounds. So I'm like, good for you. So I love that. So keep those good stories coming. Schedule a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan at eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. No counting calories, no prepackaged meals. You get to eat real food, and you can do it from anywhere. If you're watching this from Timbuktu, you can still do the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan because you can do the whole thing virtually. There's an app you get, and it's really great. Okay, we're going to get to your comments in a moment, but we're doing something fun today. I had a guy named Brad Palumbo. He co-hosts a podcast called Based Politics, and he's been on the show before. We'll probably have him on the show again, but he said, hey, Brandi, we're both trying to build our podcast. How would you feel about doing a promo swap? And we'll kind of expose you guys to his podcast. He'll do the same to his listeners. And I think if you're looking for other types of media that are just good, common sense, reasonable people with awesome takes on stuff, I think that this is a great one. So here it is, Based Politics. They have new episodes every single Wednesday. Co-hosts Brad Palumbo and Hannah Cox. They dive into the big stories of the week and also kind of viral moments or things that are trending online in that universe that you might have missed. And they break it all down from a classically liberal or libertarian perspective. And they have a lot of fun while they do it. And so I really think I enjoy their podcast. I really think that you'll enjoy it as well. So if you want to grow, if you want to join their growing podcast community, you can check out Based Politics Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. So check it out and see if you like it. And they're going to do some promoing for us, and we're just going to grow this. I don't care who, and Nicole always hates when you do this, I don't care who you listen to as long as they got common sense. And they're willing to. One of the things I like about Brad Palumbo when I follow him on social media is he has no allegiance to a party. It's like, it truly is, does this make sense or not? And so, you know, he's kind of like me where he'll tick people off one day, they'll like him the next. And so check it out, Based Politics Podcast. Okay, let's get to some comments from the day, shall we? Nicole, you want to join me for commenting?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, on Dow and drugs. Sharon on YouTube says, Dow's MO is let the problem fester until he can get in front of the camera. Now, look, even though I was wrong and I had to correct my issue on Dow, I still think he has done not a lick of anything to deal with the drug crisis. Now, I'm supporting this Prop 1, which I'm assuming there are going to be some comments on. I hope that this is a new trajectory for him of caring about the drug crisis in a way that's meaningful.
But again, don't just come out and celebrate the bust, which I do appreciate, because there is a lot of people behind the scenes really working hard to bust these people, and I appreciate the bust. But also come out and explain why it's having and why it's coming here in the first place, and address the border
I think it has to be holistic, right?
Absolutely.
As much as you want to help, because, you know, this is going to help people on the back end who are already suffering with addiction, but we need to do as much on the front end.
Right.
We need to be advocating for the president to be doing more at the southern border to stop those drugs from coming in. I'm sorry, but sanctuary policies, you really think that that's helping the situation with drugs coming up here from Mexico? It's not. Soft on crime policies. Dow, the governor, they should have been advocating for a stronger fix for the pursuit law than what Democrats are pushing right now. Because if you're trafficking drugs up through Washington state, you're not going to stop. Nobody's stopping. That's why they're doing it here. We make it so easy for people to traffic drugs in our state. If you care about lives, then you have to care about that. It can't be a pick or choose situation. On Blake, and my belief that if the Blake fix isn't strong enough, then it actually might be better to kill it and allow cities and counties to do something more meaningful for themselves. Jethro said on Patreon, I really feel like true debates in the House and Senate would fix a lot of this. We don't have true debates. We have representatives that speak for a soundbite with no pushback allowed. It may be chaos-inducing, but we need to find a way to have a true debate on these issues instead of merely giving the reps their 15 minutes of fame on a soundbite. Yeah, like, is it British Parliament? Where they're like, oh, oh, they shout during it. I would kind of love that. I can see it getting out of hand very quickly, but... Lance over on Facebook said, I really believe this administration in Washington wants to off as many people as they can and point fingers at drugs, guns, and homelessness. I don't think they want to off people, but I think they are, for some reason, content with letting people die if it means that they don't have to adopt policies that aren't politically palatable to their base. And that's, I think that they share blame in a lot of the deaths. But I don't think they're actively like, how many people?
No, but I think they're allowing chaos to happen because then everybody has to come to them for help.
Yeah.
And just like with this initiative, you have to say, okay, yep, you do the work, we'll give you the money. And we're becoming very reliant.
Do you agree with my endorsement of Proposition 1?
I need a track record of show me where this money is going. Show me that it's going to have success somehow. Where are you getting this? Where is it going? And how is it going to be successful? And then do it. But it's a lot of money for people that already have really high taxes. So show me where all of that other money is being spent correctly. And then maybe I agree with what it's funding, but I'm just not sure they'll appropriate.
I think the oversight is critical, and I do agree with you. I mean, you've had Dow's in his 4th term, right?
Right.
You have had a long time to show that you can use money to good effect. The thing that is promising to me is they're talking about the right thing.
Right.
Whereas Jay Inslee, like, I'm sorry, but I'm not giving you a cent for housing. If you are seriously going to look me in the face and say that housing is the problem here.
Right.
Because that's just la land.
I just want to know that the money that they already have is being spent correctly.
Yeah, let's read some comments on my Proposition 1 support. Beth writes, Dow has 11 hotels. They house 576 people. The hotels keep having contamination issues due to drug use and fires. How about he sells some hotels? I don't know the exact stats on that.
There are a lot of hotels that they purchased for COVID, with COVID emergency power. And I'm not sure what's happening to all of those.
Yeah.
Some of them I know aren't even being used, and there is some problems there.
Yeah, there was one in Federal Way that had meth contamination so bad that they warned the fire department, hey, if you go in there, FYI, there's meth contamination in the walls.
Yeah.
And then, So anyway, that's an issue, but I don't know the number of 11 hotels versus 576 people. I just don't have that in front of me. Dan writes, Brandi, do you trust the local government will actually use this increased budget effectively, or will it be another wasteful program and give subpar or ineffective results? No, I don't have trust. I don't think that trust is the right word. It is definitely not something I take pleasure or joy in, and I am not one to vote for tax increases. I just feel like I said, I can't sit here and rail against politicians trying to get money for things that won't help, and then when a politician outlines some things I do think will help, saying, well, I'm not going to give you money for that either. That's where I sit on that. Is I do think positive reinforcement can be effective. Politicians have big egos. And I think and that's why during the legislative session, I'll have you guys sometimes, I'll encourage you to email positive emails to politicians who voted for policies that are good, because I think we do a lot of negative reinforcement. I think positive reinforcement is just as powerful a tool, and that is the tool that I am employing here. And again, I'm not encouraging you to vote for something that doesn't impact me and my family. It does. Okay, let's see here. Marley says, when you have thousands of people openly using drugs on the street, they can't get a job, they have to commit crimes for money, they have to live on the street, affordable housing is useless to those people. I 100% agree. The only solution is locking them up and forcing them to change. I think that is a part of the solution. When you have repeat offenders who've been in jail 80 times and just cycled out, so that's proof that maybe locking them up isn't the key, but you can't just let them cycle out, and you have to make sure that there's something else there. It's not just jail, but jail has to be part of the solution. And I have interviewed people who jail is what was the nexus for them turning their lives around. It can be helped. That time of that sobering period, as miserable as it will be to sober up on the floor of a jail cell, that's valuable because you don't have that out in the real world. Right. You're not allowing yourself any moments of clarity. Okay, let me see here. I can't read this comment. Too much what? Go for big salaries. What does that mean?
Too much of the money goes to big salaries.
Oh, okay. Lolly says too much of the money goes for big salaries. Yeah, that's probably true. Is how much of these people getting paid it's the homeless industrial complex, right? How much of that is going to the structural issues as opposed to helping people on the street? David says on Facebook, if it passes, will there be oversight, or will the Democrats spend the money on other pet projects? Why do Democrats want to make the housing shortage a bigger problem with taxing people out of their homes? Are they going to attack the landlords again? I do agree that, like Inslee, I don't know that making housing more expensive for people is the way to deal with the housing. And to me, the housing crisis, they conflate it. We have a workforce housing issue in this state where I really feel like if you're working hard, you have a full-time job, 2 incomes in the household, and you can't afford a place to live here, I think that's a little absurd. But that's a different issue than housing for people who are doing drugs on the street. We have to bifurcate those two conversations. Chris says, government needs to be held accountable for ineffective spending and demand they divert funding first. If you reward this approach, you'll just get more of it. There needs to be reconciliation of spending before approving more funding. That's kind of how you felt about this, Nicole. And I don't disagree that they do have to account for the billions of dollars that have gone down the drain to no avail. But a lot of that has been spent on the homeless industrial complex and on approaches that don't work, whereas here I see an opportunity to spend some money on approaches that are proven to work, and so I like that. Let me see here. On our Choe interview, having Jonathan Cho on, this is from a YouTube comment from Two Ladies Midwest Adventures.
I thought that was a fun YouTube name.
I have been praying Cho stays safe in all of his work, too. I so worry about him with how things are there. He freaks me out.
I know.
Some guy's chasing him with a baseball bat, and he's like filming him. I'm like, somebody chased him with a hatchet?
I know.
I'm like, Jonathan, just run away.
No fear, that guy.
Oh, no fear. Christine says on Facebook, Brandi, I love your journalism and news. I love listening to you at work at the hospital. Oh, that's nice, Christine. You got to let us know what hospital you work at and what you do at the hospital. That's a tough job. That's been struggle fest for hospital workers. I imagine you're short-staffed everywhere. So that's pretty rough. Although my sister did say when she was in the ICU last week for her breathing issue, she said that was in Miami, Florida, of course. She said, oh my God, the food at the hospital was so good. She had me on FaceTime and she was showing me some of the food. I was like, because it was Easter. She was there on Easter. She got
was a special
awesome
holiday
lunch.
meal?
I don't think so. It was just good. She said all the food has been great. I was on FaceTime when the nurses came in. They were all so sweet. And she's like, people have been amazing here. It's been such a pleasant experience. And I'm like,
I
oh
mean,
my gosh.
all the nurses I know are very pleasant and sweet.
But if you're short staffed, that can lead to a lot of like stress and all of that.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, how about we end with a little check of everyone's sanity, shall we? Okay, it is our segment. Sanity check. I talked just a few minutes ago about the absolute insanity that played out on the streets of Chicago over the weekend. We can revisit a little bit of it. You had some shootings. As Nicole stated, you had people who were pulled out of cars. I think we got some video here. I mean, just absolute insanity, attacking innocent people, driving by in their cars, jumping on cars, the violence, the vandalism, all of that happened. And the response of the incoming mayor in Chicago is to say, hey, we can't demonize these kids. We can't vilify these kids. We need to find a place for them to go at night. That isn't to our answers. Where are they going to go? Are they going to go play checkers? You want to bring them to Chuck E. Cheese? I don't think that's going to end. Are there still Chuck E. Cheeses?
Yes. Oh
man, those things were They creeped me out.
Right here in Bellevue.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right there in Linwood.
Okay, all right,
Mount Vernon. Yes, there's many.
And there was an incident, and I'll play just a little sound from it that happened in Chicago or in Seattle over the weekend, which again, they've been doing these burnouts, these car racers and stuff in front of the Space Needle. Here's a little video. You see the people standing around as it's happening, police nearby. They do not care at all. No care, no concern, no respect for the police presence. When I was a kid, if you were doing something illegal and the police pulled up, panic set in. Do you see any panic in that crowd?
I don't even see panic when the car comes barreling at them and you don't really know if it's going to make the turn.
What you're seeing there is a group of young people who have no disregard for the law. They have no respect for the rule of law. They have no respect for authority, as you'll see right there. When we were kids, and I'm sure I speak for many of you, it would be an insane proposition to be breaking the law, which we sometimes did. Now, I'll admit to some underage drinking, okay? But to suggest that when the cops showed up at our door, we would stand there and drink a beer, keep drinking a beer in front of them, is an insane proposition. So I think when it comes to how insane things have become, and we look at what's happening in Chicago, we look at the fact that they get rid of Lori Lightfoot only to bring in someone who wants to coddle youth who are committing violent crimes. We need to seriously think about the direction and the opportunity to change the direction in the city of Seattle this year. 7 of 9 Seattle City Council seats up for grabs. You look at, again, the blatant disrespect for the rule of law that you see in that video clip outside the Space Needle from over the weekend. We cannot elect people who believe that it's right to dismiss criminal actions because someone's under the age of 18. We cannot elect people who believe that criminally violent youth need to be coddled, that we need to continue to instill in these young people that there are no consequences for their actions, that they don't have to respect law enforcement. And I think Chicago is foreshadowing what Seattle could become if we don't do something this year. It would be insane to keep going in the direction that we've been going. It would be insane to see what's happening in Chicago and not tell ourselves we've got to do something different. And that has been your sanity check for today. All right, thank you so much for joining us on this Monday episode of Undivided. We appreciate all of you, particularly subscribers to the show. We appreciate your support of this mission and this movement to give common sense a comeback. We will be back with another live show tomorrow at 12 p.m. In the meantime, go to undividedpod.com. That's undividedpod.com. It's a one-stop shop for all things Undivided. You can find out how to watch the show, how to listen to the show. You can contact us if you'd like with news tips, and you can find out how to subscribe to support the show for as little as $5 a month on Patreon or Locals. We'll see you guys tomorrow.